Well, we always start with an awkward intro, so guess we can just skip that. So, like you were talking about before we started, every time you get interviewed, you always get asked about, oh, NMRA this, NMRA that. Just talk about yourself for a second. How did you get into the hobby?
Um, how did I get into the hobby? Well, I think I was born into the hobby. So, my father owned a business that manufactured brass kits in O scale, and so I was born into the hobby. I can remember earliest memories are of dad's model railroad friends coming round to the house and packing kits and going to shows and packing up to go to train shows and um, there being the latest catalog. I mean, obviously I'm not that old, but look, it's talking pre the internet, so it was magazines and articles being proofed in the house, and there was catalogs being put together, and me and my brother were always getting in the wrong box and throwing the bits of things around. So they're kind of from a young age, and I think he took me to my first train show when I was about 4 years old, and by the time I was 6, I was operating one of the largest O-scale model railways in the country, and I would go every public holiday weekend. So, like for the guys in the States, equivalent of 4th of July weekend and Labor Day. We obviously don't celebrate the 4th of July one, but this guy would have an operating session, and I'd be sat in front of a control panel. It was all DC back then, and we'd be running trains. So I've always been in the hobby, not always been modeling North American stuff, but always been doing bits and pieces, and of course being in that kind of niche. It was a little bit of a niche thing. It was fine scale. It was scale modeling. It wasn't. I didn't come in with the train set under the Christmas tree or anything like that. It was like I was brought in with these are things that you can't touch, which is a difficult thing when
Yeah.
you're younger. And so from there, eventually, I would have been probably about 10 years old. I finally persuaded my dad to get me my first train that was my own, but that on my father's eyes, that meant it had to be a different scale, because then there would be no excuse for us to go and dive into his trains. So my first layout was actually an N scale oval on a 4x2 sheet of chipboard. At the time, it was the heaviest thing ever. But I had that, and it went round, and there was a station at the back, and there was a bit of staging at the back, station at the front, and I had that, and that was my first layout when I was like 10 years old, and from there, it kind of went from there. But when I was 14, about 14, maybe a bit younger than that, yeah, about 13, 14, my father my father's job changed, and he had to start doing weekend on call. But weekend on call for my dad my dad's job meant weekend in the office. It didn't mean on call. It meant he was going in every weekend. And so sometimes he would take me in with him to work, but more often than not, a family friend would take me down to the local NMRA division on the other side of let's say local, other side of the city. But for the UK, if people listening to this will know about the British region, kind of having a local division of the NMRA is a big thing, because it's quite spread out. It's not as big as it is in the States. And so I went there and started collecting Athens blue box cars, because I could get, so my pocket money back then was £5, which was about back then the dollar wasn't worth as much, so it was worth about $10, which back in the early or late 90s was probably a decent amount of money, even a kid in the States. But in the UK, a fiver a month, that was my pocket money, £5 a month, would get you an Athens blue box kit for £4, and it would leave you £1, which was just enough to go and buy a portion of fries for people in the States, chips for people in the UK, and a can of soda or pop for my lunch at the NMRA meet. And the guys at the NMRA meet, a lot of them I'm friends with now as an adult. Never knew who they were, never knew what they were called. They never challenged me that I was a youngster. No one told me what the NMRA was, unfortunately. I wish they had, because I probably would have been a member a lot earlier.
Wow.
No one told me about the achievement program, but all of them encouraged me
Mhm.
to do something. And every month that I went, I'd have built the previous month's box car, and they'd show me how to make sure my KDs were the right height, change things over to have KDs on, encourage me to put metal wheel sets into my models and stuff like that. And it was all these little chips of encouragement that I got as a youngster that really got me into it. But no one ever asked me was I an NMRA member. No one ever challenged me on that. No, back in those days, in fact, if you were under 16, you didn't even need to pay to go in. Now, other people would put in for me. They'd see me come in and they'd put the little bit in that was, I think it was 50 pence for a kid or whatever. But I would never get, never had to pay to go there. It was so encouraging, and stuff. So that's really where I started, and that was started my engagement and involvement in the NMRA. And then, you know, people say like things happen and blah blah blah, but for me, all through my high school years, I would travel, and that layout that I operated as a 6-year-old, I would now go on the train, like the commuter trains, to the guy's house, operate the layout, and he operated every Friday. So I would go operate the layout, so maybe every third Friday of the month, and I would go operate the layout, and then um, uh, a friend of my father's who lived near where we lived, this was about 80 miles from where we actually lived. I would get on the train and disappear the wrong direction to go home, would drive me home from an operating session. And I did that for 2 years, every single week, all through high school. And then when I was 16, I went into the military, and I went away for 4 years into the military, and went through Britannia Royal Naval College and a few other bits and pieces and stuff I can't really talk about. But did that, left because I was injured and had to leave, and kind of stepped away from modelling because I was at sea, and you can't really take your trains to sea with you,
Yeah.
you know. Although I do have a friend who I do have not a great friend, but a friend, a person that I know quite well, who lives in Scotland, who is in the army, and he's in the Royal Electrical Mechanical Engineers. So he's an armourer. He maintains artillery, and in his foxhole in Afghanistan, he scratch built locomotives in plasticard in Afghanistan, where things melt. Plastic melts in the sun. But he managed to build models every time he went away to Afghanistan. So it was possible. I just was lazy, I guess. But and then I disconnected from the hobby a little bit until probably about 2008, 2009. Me and my father started building his O-scale retirement layout, which is a multi-deck 40 by 20 layout. And that was my main thing. I still had my own interest. I still had my own models, but didn't have a layout, worked on that. And then, in 2014, 15, I joined the NMRA properly, and got back into the hobby full time. So kind of not the standard path, but and I still have lots of, because it was such an eclectic journey that I've been on. I still have lots of interest. The Aussies call me a rubber bander, which means that, a rubber band modeler, and can't pick a scale, can't pick a prototype. But I'm trying to stick with something now. But I like to just have a go with things. You know what it's like, Drew. You've got to go. Oh, I like that. That seems like a skill I can go and try. Well, it doesn't hurt to try. Go and do it. So I have quite a lot of projects always on the go.
Cool. So you're starting to talk about now. What do you currently model? What scale and what do you like to line?
So currently I have 1, 2. I've got three what we call train show layouts, exhibition layouts in the UK. One in O scale, 2 in HO.
Okay.
And then I've got some Fremo modules in HO. That having been said, I'm currently building downstairs in my new house an N scale model of the Wisconsin, ex-Wisconsin Central and the Wisconsin Southern in Wisconsin. So it's going to be quite a large layout. It's a project to last me. I'm 33. It's a project I intend on having last me until I retire, before it might get done. But it's got the Wisconsin, it's the northern subdivision, the Oshkosh subdivision really of the Wisconsin Southern.
Mhm.
And that's on 4 levels in a corner of the room. And then in the main part of the room, the main layout is going to be 2 or 3 levels of the CN main line between Slinger, Wisconsin and Waukesha, Wisconsin. So it's cool, it's different, and it's really interesting because modeling something that's 4,500 miles away that I've visited on one occasion and photographed extensively, but only once for one day,
Yeah.
is a real challenge. And it's great. The friends that I've met through the NMRA really helped me, supply me with track charts or timetables or information about where trains go, because trains run through that bit of line, but they can be run through trains from NS, run through trains from CSX. There's trains there from UP. There's BNS. Everything's running through there because it's on the main corridor out of Chicago. So pretty much anything goes, pool power and all that. But you want to kind of understand. I want to understand where the trains go from and where they go to, so we can do some prototype operations. Not that anyone, pretty much, who comes and operates my layout is going to have a clue where Slinger, Wisconsin is, or where DePlainville is, or any of the places on my layout. But I know, so I want to get it right. And also because of where I live, I guess we can come on to where I live in a bit, but because of where I live and the remoteness of it, I'm building the whole layout with remote operations in mind. So there's a lot of block detection in there. It's all computerized. All the turnouts are powered. All the turnouts are connected to JMRI. Everything's exposed on a web server. We have throttles. There's IP cameras that I've got I've got a lot of them. They all need setting up, but there'll be a lot of cameras around the layout, like fixed security cameras on buildings and stuff. Not I don't believe in the in front of the train thing. In N scale, it doesn't look very well. You're going to struggle to put a camera in an N scale locomotive with the technology that's available today to get any kind of picture that is of sufficient quality to not crash or to read the signals. So strategically placed cameras, remote operators communicating through the internet. Yeah, great. So that's the plan long term. But I'm still dabbling in a few other bits and things, and I'm still doing work for my dad. So obviously with COVID and all that kind of stuff, I can't travel this year down to work on the layout. Normally I would go and spend at least a couple of weekends, if not a week, working on his layout. I'm currently working on the point rodding for the interlocking, to add that to a section of scenery that I've done. Go and renew that scenery. He's had some building work done and it's got a bit damaged, and I want to enter that scenery for my achievement program certificate. So I need to go and properly photograph it, and kind of the final piece of that jigsaw that will make that scene pop will be the point rodding. So just need to get that done, but hopefully COVID permitting, that'll get done in the next 12 months. So
Very cool. So in the area where I am, a lot of the media that you get about European modeling is that it's 99% double O. Have you ever made a double O layout, or do you primarily model North American stuff?
I would say I primarily model North American stuff. I'm not going to say I've not made a layout in double O, and double O is the primary scale, 4 mm. We call it 4 mil because 4 millimeters to the foot is the scale, and there's people that do OO double O, we call that double O gauge or OO gauge, which is on 16.5 millimeter track. But there's other guys who are more fine scale, and there's actually 2 different levels of 4 millimeter fine scale. One's called EM, and one's called P4. And so those guys still use 4mm scale, but the track gauge is more to scale, because the track gauge is about 18mm, not 16.5. It just looks completely different. Once you put one double O gauge layout next to a EM or a P4 layout, and you can immediately tell the difference. It's immediate. Wow. It's so obvious. Yeah, that's the primary scale. The UK doesn't have a lot of very large layouts. Most people's layouts, most people's room for their entire hobby is less than a 10 by 10 room. So most people go in what we call a box room, and a box room are about 8 feet by 6 feet or less. Some are 4 by 6 in the older houses, and that's the entirety of somebody's modeling space. So a lot of people make layouts that are less than 8 square feet or less than 12 square feet,
Wow.
and even in double O gauge. But you do get your clubs. There's still quite a lot of model railway clubs in the UK, probably more than in the US. More densely populated. You got to remember, the UK is a very densely populated country. It's kind of like the eastern seaboard of the United States, or the northeastern part of it. And so it's very densely populated in mostly in England, but there's still lots of model railway clubs, and that's because people don't have the physical space. But yeah, double O gauge is probably the most popular stuff. It's certainly kind of like HO. It's the scale you can get the most material in out the box, or kits, or weird and wonderful prototypes. But you know, N scale is not far behind in the UK, and in Europe in general, the smaller scales tend to be more popular than they are in the United States. So N scale is a lot more popular here than it was in the US. I think N scale's actually seen a revival in the US. I think it's growing. I think there's some good manufacturers, like the work being done by Microtrains and Scale Trains coming into that market, and are, you know, really helping to drive forward N scale and the quality, and you know, ready to run weathered models every month coming out from Microtrains is just keeping that everyone's interest ticking over there. So yeah, but O scale is actually one of the. What's weird is that when I say O scale, I mean 2 rail.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we don't have O scale 3 rail in the UK. It's very, very niche.
That's
It's
the
very
way it
small.
should be.
Yeah. Whereas in the US, nothing against the 3 railers in the US, but in the US, it's still very traditionally very popular aspect of O scale. But one of the biggest growing scales in the United Kingdom at the moment is O scale, and that's because we sold, the family business was sold in 2001. So pre 2001, pre 2000, there was not any ready to run in the UK. People didn't go and get brass models made in Korea. Didn't happen. Not UK prototypes. They were kits, and people crafted them like machine tools. They were unbelievable. The workmanship was incredible. And then Bachmann brought out ready to run brass. People had to paint it. But say that was the first 5 years of the noughties, 2005, 2006. Suddenly, a Danish company called Hellion came onto the scene, and Hellion now produced 4mm and 2mm. No, not 2mm, 4mm scale models. And but they came in with ready to run 7mm O gauge models, and boom, it went off. And what they did is they came out with modern prototypes. Now, we were all still stuck in the steam age and steam locomotives and early diesels, and some of the early diesels had been painted up by people in blue diesels, which was 1970s era British stuff. And I can remember seeing my first blue diesel on a layout and going, oh, wow, someone's modeling something modern. And it was 30 years old at that point. You know, you didn't see a modern livery in O scale at that time, or if you did, it was very rare. And then all of a sudden, boom, they started producing things with the modern liveries. And they started producing, because they know O scale's big. People's space for layouts doesn't get any bigger. The trains get bigger. You need less of them, so you can detail them more. That's great. But you need smaller locomotives. So they started coming out with ready to run smaller prototypes, not big 6-axle locomotives, 2-axle locomotives. And O scales exploded in the UK, absolutely exploded. We now have Snaptrack, in O scale in two rail in the UK. We never had sectional track in O scale two rail ever. I can remember when you had a choice of a left hand and a right hand turnout, in that was it. There was one left hand, one right hand commercial turnout. Everything else was scratch built and flex track, and everything else you had to build yourself. Now we've got so much stuff. So yeah, O scale's cornering quite a bit of the market, and it's taking away that 4 mil market. So can you imagine in the US, in the space of 20 years, if people suddenly went from HO to O scale, and suddenly O scale was cornering nearly 20% of the market? Imagine this, the seismic shift that would be. Whereas what you've seen in the US is Weaver models finishing, being acquired by Atlas, less of the brass manufacturers producing brass because the HO scale market's being diminished by the quality coming out from Genesis and scaletrains.com and all those great manufacturers upping the quality of the material, has led to a bit less brass being produced than maybe was in the 90s. And so, yeah, you're seeing, you know, it's amazing. But yeah, double O is probably the biggest, but O scale and N scale is gaining on them.
So, is modern stuff available now, or is it more so still like you're saying, transition era steam?
I would say the majority of people in the UK still hark back to transition era. I think there's this weird. The UK is very weird, very very weird, right? There's this. The 70s and 80s weren't good for us for many reasons, but the UK 70s and 80s not great. There's very little film, very little archival footage of the diesels in the 70s and 80s and stuff. So interestingly, although it's growing now, because as people retire, they model their youth. So I'd say the majority of people model transition era, what you would call transition era. Our transition era is kind of more 50s and 60s because steam lasted till 68 on the main line in parts of the UK. But it then takes this huge jump right through to the last 15 years. And so stuff that's been running in the last 15 years up to today is extremely popular. People really like modeling little tractive motive depots. I think there's probably more layouts of locomotive repair work places and engine servicing places than there are real engine servicing places in the UK, right? And these fictitious layouts. I think there's probably thousands of them because it's a place you can get a small layout, small space, lots of locomotives, and people like collecting locomotives can display them. So they're extremely popular, those kind of small layouts. But the stuff in the blue era, as we call it, was British Railways livery was blue from 1969 through to sectorization, which is when the liveries changed, kind of late 80s. And that era, that 20-year gap, is kind of not as well modeled. But you'll find in the UK, a lot of people actually model what we call pre-grouping, which is era one of model of railways. We have eras, and so you're talking First World War and earlier. So just after so in the UK in 1923, the government, the First World War ruined the economy. We owed America a lot of money as usual. After every World War, we owe America a lot of money because that's where our bank, that's basically our cash cow. And so our railways were also absolutely on their knees. The equipment was wrecked. It was ruined. They were all little individual railway companies, kind of like it was in the States. And rather than naturally allowing mergers to occur, a large merger of two of the biggest railway companies, or the railway companies with the biggest amount of traffic, occurred in 1922. And that prompted the government to go and look at the competition of this and say, actually, they're merging because it's not viable. If it's not viable for them to be independent, then it's not viable for a lot of these railway companies to be independent. And if these railways stop operating, you know, there's not enough roads and infrastructure in the UK, the country's economy is going to grind to a halt. So they merged the railway companies into four. This was called the Big Four. And then that stayed the same until another world war came along. The Germans came and redecorated quite a lot.
Mm.
The Italians tried a few times, but mostly the Germans came and rearranged quite a lot of the UK cities in the south and Midlands of England. And so after the war, the railways are trashed again. And we'd had locomotives come in from the US. We were using those. They were only designed to run for 2 years. Most of them ran for 20. They were brought in, and so in 1948, it merged again. And that was nationalisation, where British Railways started. And from 48 to 68, that 20-year period, that's the majority of what people model. So
Okay.
it's a little UK history lesson for people that might not be familiar with
Very
how it
cool.
works.
So, as far as what you model, continuing on that, what brands do you like? Are you a DCC sound guy? Are you an Athearn guy? A Rapido guy?
So I don't kind of favor any one particular manufacturer. I kind of stay a little bit neutral there, but I'm an N scaler. All of my locomotives have sound, which for N scale is quite. I'm an idiot. Yeah, I admit it. I'm a lunatic. All my locomotives have to have sound in N scale, and some of the speakers are a bit tinny. We still need to perfect that, and I wish manufacturers would just put more space in there for sound, because that's difficult in N scale and keep alive and all that kind of stuff. But the majority of my N scale locomotives come from Atlas or scale trains, to be fair. So that's just because, and it's no particular favoritism. That's just because they've made the models of my prototype. Oh, and Kato as well, of course. It's just that they've made the models of the prototypes that I need for my layout. I've not got any particular bias. I would say across all the stuff I've got, because of course I've got a lot of HO for my show layouts, and HO stock. I've got Atlas, Athearn, Rapido. I have got one Scale Trains locomotive. I've got scaletrains.com ST40-3 CSX SpongeBob, and my old scale, I've got Atlas as well. So I've kind of got everything. But one thing for me is that sound was a game changer for me.
Mm-hmm.
And DCC came to the UK really late. I would say sound and DCC in the UK is still in its infancy. And still it's a very, very expensive to get a sound fitted locomotive. Like if you do the exchange rate to the US prices, DCC ready is about the same, but sound equipped loco can be 2.5 times the price of an equivalent loco that's sound equipped in the US. Obviously the loco's prototypes are different, but equivalent, number of axles and size and stuff. So yeah, I think I kind of remember back in 2004, I was at a train show, and I was at it was an O scale layout as well. And the guys had 2004, they had sound and smoke, but it wasn't just smoke, it was driven smoke units, and it was a diesel layout. So there was a lot of clag, a lot of really good stuff. And that was it. And I was like, what's that? They've got speakers under the layout, and everybody, no word of a lie, I'm not making this up. They have curtains, like skirts, as we call them, in front of the layout, right? So we have cloth in front of the layout to make it presentable at train shows. And it was like watching a bunch of lasses round a Scotsman. Everyone's lifting up the curtain to look for the speakers under the layout. No one could believe, and this is all scale, it's massive. No one could believe that the locomotive was making the noise. And that was only 15 years ago in the UK. So, yeah, for me, that was it. I made that decision that day. Everything that I have, when I can afford to do it, is going to have sound. So all my locomotives have sound and DCC.
Is the hobby, you'd say, more prevalent in the UK than in the US? Would you say there's like a higher density of modelers in the...
I would say you're comparing apples and pears. So let's just go back to some basics, all right? Disposable income is a main thing driving people's hobbies. Forget trains for a minute, hobbies in general. And I would say there is a larger amount of disposable income amongst US households than there is in Europe. And so in the United States and Canada, given the nature, the size of the countries, the opportunities, you have a greater range of hobbies. All right. And you also have, compared to the UK, a greater range of school and high school and college sports that drag people down into a big time commitment in their youth, right? Um, but that having been said, in the UK, speaking specifically about the UK, for males, and I'm not going to say that all model railroaders are male because that is crap. They're absolutely not. There is a lot of ladies that model trains and model very well,
Uh-huh.
and we need to encourage more to get involved. But after fishing, model trains is the biggest by dollar value hobby for men in the United Kingdom.
Wow.
It's huge. We have it's in its third series if it gets filmed. It probably won't get filmed this year, but we have. I know they've signed for the third series. Something called the Great Model Railway Show,
Yeah.
which is like takes the format of British Bake Off or the British Baking Show, whatever it's called in the US, um, and applies that to the building layouts. And the guys get like 24 hours, which works out as two 8-hour days to build a layout. And okay, it's the purists out there and the prototype modelers are gonna really, you know, go, but they're not. They're based around like a film as the theme, and that film could be sci-fi. So they're not necessarily prototype specific in any way, shape, or form. It's just about enjoying the hobby and showing the skills and sharing, because scenery is scenery, whether you're making a layout that's on an imaginary planet or whether you're making a model of London. Scenery is scenery. So they have to make it interesting to a mainstream audience. But oh boy, let me tell you. So we did that 3 years ago now, that came out, and the numbers at train shows had been flatlined. Still very good, but flatlined. I mean, there's tons of train shows every weekend in the UK in any other year than 2020, and it went up like this. And the number of young families went up, and the number of multi-generational families at train shows went up. Everybody's gates went up because of this show on primetime TV. It was unbelievable. And what you were seeing is people buying train sets, families walking out with train sets. Whereas, having been in the trade, as a kid, I always keep an eye on what people are buying and watch behaviors and stuff, because you can learn so much about trends and what's going to happen. And in the past, I would notice kids walking out with Thomas the Train toys, basically,
Yeah.
Ertl toys and stuff like that. Now you're seeing them with dad or mom. A lot of it being single mums, to be honest, walking out with a train set,
Uh-huh.
and then asking,
Actually existed.
yeah, and then going around the train show talking to the layouts, because we don't have lots of modular groups, we have lots of individual layouts, very, very highly detailed layouts, and a lot of them, like mine operate from the front, so I can talk to the public and we can interact, and you'd be being asked questions about, I've seen this on the Great British Model Railway Show or whatever it's called. How do I do this? How do I animate something? How do I do the other? And you'd see them going to the traders that are really primarily niche people, but because they've got some kind of animation, the kids would go, oh, I want to do that and I want to replicate that thing I've seen on the train show. And so it's just been great for the hobby. And I hope they take it to the US. I know they're trying to. I hope they take it to the US, because it'll do great things for the hobby. And we all need to really get behind and get involved in that if it happens. So, yeah, it's big. It's big. But go ahead, sorry.
I don't know. Just you talk. It's good.
Just keep talking. So like, I think the hobby in the US is bigger than people think it is. I really do. I think though, it takes an event like what we've seen in 2020 for people to realize how big something is. When
Absolutely.
you start to see the numbers of people turning back to a hobby that they can do without having to leave their homes. And that's what model trains is. But people were already doing that hobby. They've not discovered the hobby because of COVID. But what's happened is, as humans, we're herd animals, and we still want to be able to communicate and talk and interact and stuff. So what you've then seen is people seeking out other people online. And so I'm going to use Christina Zambri, who is the NMRA marketing consultant, and we work together. We worked together for 3 years now. We work together really, really closely. I've stayed in her house when I've been over in the States, and we've worked on NMRA projects and stuff quite a lot, all the time. And really good friend. So we talk quite a lot. And what she said to me is, after April and May, she'd found 3 other people, one of whom was a neighbor who had a model railroad in his basement. She never even knew. She's a member of a local division. He's not involved in the NMRA, this guy. He didn't even know really about the NMRA. And then there's another person who's there building a layout with his son, and they'd already started before COVID, and then obviously it became the main thing that they could do because they couldn't go out. So yeah, I think that the hobby is bigger than people think. And if you think the hobby's dying, it might be time for you to go and see the doctor, because not because something's wrong in your head, but it might be a sign that maybe you're getting on in years, and we need people of all ages, right? I'm not ageist at all. Absolutely, I am not. I have some fantastic model railroad friends around the world who are in their 90s and 80s who give me the best advice and ask me for advice, and we work together because we're all in the hobby together. But when all of your friends around you are dying or are coming to that age that it's the end of their lives, it can feel like things are dying, and it can feel like the hobby's dying. And if the people that you've been friends with for 10, 15, 20 years in your model railway club, half of them are not here anymore, it can feel like the hobby's dying. But it's not. It's just the natural progression of life. And the challenge that we face is that we need to keep cycling through. And unfortunately, the NMRA is not a school system. The great thing about why do schools not go away is because every year there's a new intake of kids, and the birth rate may be down in some countries, but there's still kids being born. And just as there's children being born, that means there's more model railroaders being born every day of the year. We just need to get them. And I don't want to sound like that weird guy on Family Guy that has a Zimmer frame and drags kids into his house. Absolutely not, right? But what we need to do is, model railroaders are of all ages. And what we need to do is we need to appeal to those people and bring them in. So if they're not coming to us, it's either because they don't know about us or because what we're offering isn't meeting their needs. Either because they can't see it, which I don't believe, because we market. If you know about us, you're going to get hit by our marketing, but by the hobby and by the wider press in the hobby. But especially with all the algorithms and modern technology that's out there. But we're not offering something to them for them to join, and so yeah, the hobby is absolutely not dying. I mean, it's it's growing, and if I am yet to speak to a manufacturer, not necessarily a local hobby shop, because I think this year is a really tough year for a local hobby shop.
Yeah.
With all the restrictions, if they've not got an online presence, I can see how tough it is for them. It's terrible. It's probably the worst thing that could have happened to your local hobby shop this year. And if you can still support them and get curbside delivery, absolutely should do that. But the rest of the industry as a whole, the hobby as a whole, Pico manufacture most of the world's track used in model railroads around the world, right? I'm friends with some Australians, and I saw how excited they were that a box of Pico track arrived, after months and months of it being quite difficult to get. But the reason it's difficult to get is not because Pico shut down, although they did for a few months while they put in place safety measures for COVID. It's because, in their own words, it's been Christmas. Christmas is usually, for the hobby industry, 1 month of the year, December, from Black Friday to Christmas, it's mental. It was mental 20 years ago. I can imagine what it's like now. It's mental. Everyone's getting gifts for their friends. It's the biggest gift giving time of the year. People have money. A lot of companies pay bonuses. So kind of Christmas time, that December time frame is, and also people get bored and sick of the family and disappear out the corner and go on Amazon or eBay or Train World or whatever, right? It's the busy time of the year. Pico said it's felt like Christmas since March. And so that Christmas rush in the hobby has been mental. And I go online and look now at eBay or hobby stores online, and it's out of stock, out of stock, out of stock, out of stock. It's not because people have stopped producing it. It's because the number of people buying it has gone through the roof. And so people have started investing. Not really people have gone on a vacation this year. And so no one's gone to train shows. No one's had the travel expenses. A lot of people have found now they're working from home, they're not having to put the gas in the tank every week. They're putting the gas in the tank once a month. I think from March to kind of June, my car did less than 100 miles. So all that diesel money got reinvested in the hobby, and everyone else is doing the same thing. So I'd say 2020 has been a great year for the hobby, and the hobby's growing. And we can't gauge it by how much, but oh boy, is it growing. But we being the NMRA, and I say we the NMRA, not as a board member or because I'm not as anything to do with the national NMRA. Just speaking as we, as in we are all members of this organization, and so we all have the collective power to change things. We need to have a very introspective look at what we're doing, whether we are appealing, how we can stay relevant and keep that appeal, because it's not just about setting the standards. It's absolutely not. The NMRA is more than that. If you go and read the documents of on the NMRA's website, what the NMRA should be, it's a lot more than that. But it's a big organization, and what we need to do is we need to discover what it is that we need to do to be successful. I have some great ideas of what that is, and stuff, and it really goes down to our educational roots and rediscovering those and reimagining them. But it's also about, a lot of people, and me included, say the NMRA happens at the grassroots. It's where the boots hit the road. It's where the rubber hits the road. The boots are on the ground. You measure the success of an army based on the soldiers on the ground, and whether they conduct themselves properly, uphold the organization, behave themselves, are welcoming, and look after the local population. And it's the same with the NMRA. The NMRA has foot soldiers around the world who are there to promote the NMRA. And unfortunately, unwittingly, sometimes, like any organization, we let ourselves down. And that's either by being unwelcoming, saying things about we're only interested in certain ages, whether that's the right thing from a marketing perspective. Hand on heart, probably are more people joining the NMRA that are retiring and looking for something to do with their lives. I would admit that. But that's not the only people that we're marketing to. That's not the only people we're trying to appeal to. And that's certainly not the only people joining the NMRA. So it's kind of how we communicate those messages could be so much better. And it's there's nothing fundamentally broken with the NMRA. But it's those little tweaks that we need to make to just change the story, change the message, and change our future. And if we can do those things without making fundamental changes, I wouldn't like to see radical, fundamental political change in the NMRA, because it's successful that it's still here. It's 80 years old, nearly. It's still here. No, it's more than that. It's 85 years old this year. It's still here. It's still growing strong. It's still the biggest model railway organization outside of China in the world. It's still growing. It's still going. It's just that we can't keep our members, and we can't keep our members because once they get in the door for numerous reasons, they leave. You know, just a few of them. Let me give you a few of those reasons, Drew, if that's okay. So one of the biggest reasons why people leave is because we don't have a life membership anymore. We have an annual membership. It doesn't auto renew. It should be a subscription that auto renews. People should be able to sign up to auto renew. Then people like me who lead busy lives won't forget to renew. Most people, our solution to that currently is that some divisions and regions phone them up and they remember and they renew. And they go, oh, I forgot. And most people genuinely did. So that's one of the things, simple things to fix. Simple things to fix will immediately help with retention and keeping members. We have the NMRA magazine. For a long time, we've said no to digital for various well-founded good reasons. I mean, the NMRA magazine needs to stay in some form because to help our members be published, which is part of our achievement program, our education program about educating other members, it's a great way for us to put their articles in because we control the editorialness of that. We have editorial control over it. We don't have editorial control over role model craftsmen or other people. We choose, as we chose in September, to put Thomas the Train as our back advert on the magazine. So we control that. However, we are now proposing this year in the British region to charge people for NMRA membership with the magazine over £100. That's over $140 US. That is just simply too much. That's the equivalent of subscribing to all of the British model railroading press, all the magazines, paper versions, right? It's ridiculous. That is not 5 times the cost of a British magazine is not sustainable if we want to keep subscribers. So we need to try a digital option, even if it's just for overseas members, so that they can keep engaged with the organization and keep engaged with their hobby. Obviously, there can be a cost to that, and I'm sure that most overseas members would pay exactly the same price as the US members pay for print, but receive a digital copy. It saves on shipping, it saves the environment, it's all very eco-friendly, it's all better for the members, things don't take months to arrive, it's there in their hands at the same point that you receive it in the US. So there's 2 really simple things that we can do. And kind of, so think about how we communicate messages. And sorry, that's my 3rd thing. Not talked about that one. Talk about that. So first one, auto renewals. Second one, digital magazine as a trial for overseas members to see how that would work within the NMRA. Funded by those members, whatever the cost would be, they would need to fund it, but it would still be cheaper, probably. It would be cheaper than producing the print copy. The 3rd thing, probably most important of the 3 things that we could quickly do to the NMRA to make things a little bit better for everyone is communication. And the way we speak and the way we communicate messages. We need to be, no one turns up to work to do a bad job, and no one in the NMRA is out to do a bad job. But we need to communicate better. The youth policy wasn't very well communicated. It could have been better. I would have, if I was on the board at that time, I would have been pushing for the youth policy to come out, but also some kind of discount or incentive for young people that are NMRA members to be able to bring an adult or have an adult join the NMRA with them at a reduced cost. And in actuality, that can happen through the family member anyway. So the way family membership works, it can happen like that anyway. But it can just, that already exists, but it wasn't, we didn't present it like that. And simple things, all simple things. And then, some of our systems in the back office are a little bit antiquated. Could be improved. We could do more digitally there, and we should really embrace that and try to do that. And yes, some of our members are not digital, and that's okay. We shouldn't stop doing what we do today, because what we do today meets their needs, so we shouldn't stop doing it. But we should be, as I said, doing what we need to do to meet the needs of the people that are not members. And we are a membership organization, but we need to grow that membership organization to make it sustainable in the future. So we should be embracing some more digital technologies, and I know that our members that are already members will appreciate that. So that kind of stuff can be looked at. And then in terms of direction for the organization, I'm a member of other organizations other than the NMRA, and one that I joined simply because it was a source of code 40 rail for my N-scale projects that wasn't microengineering. Nothing against microengineering, but if anyone's ever tried shipping 3-foot lengths of rail across the Atlantic, you will know it costs as much as shipping the real thing, right? It doesn't fit on an aeroplane very well. It's not something you can put in your suitcase very well. And so the guys at the 2mm Association, 2mm fine scale guys, I joined that organization. It's a worldwide organization, but unlike the NMRA, so the NMRA is headquartered in the United States, they're headquartered in the UK, but they're a global organization, and they promote people modeling where 2mm is a scale foot. So it's a little bit larger than American N scale, but smaller than British N scale, but on a track gauge that's wider, slightly different to British N scale. British N scale is 9mm, it's 9.42 mil. So what they're growing as an organization, so they're extremely niche. I mean, mega niche. Who models, the American market, they can never appeal to really people who model American prototype, because 1/160th to 9mm track is as close to scale as you're going to get, measurable, unless you're going around with a micrometer measuring the track gauge, right? It's as close as you're going to get, and there's a huge amount of stuff there for it. There's not a need, but in UK, Europe, Japan, Australia, there is the opportunity there for people to model in 2mm fine scale, and what they don't have anything like the achievement program that the NMRA has, and we haven't even touched on the achievement program. We should probably make sure I talk about that before we finish. But they do they sell stuff for their custom scale through their shop, either stuff that's other manufacturers' stuff or their own produced stuff, a reduced cost to members. And you absolutely have to be a member to order from the shop. So when I wanted to buy rail, I wanted to pay £3.50 for 10 meters of rail. It cost me £20 to join the organization. But I did it because I wanted to access the shop, right? And so I've been a member now for 2.5 years because I wanted to access the shop. And I've probably spent about £50 in the shop on rail in that time, and ties and other things. And however, every 2 months they've sent me a magazine, and I've read it, and there's stuff online, and I've gone and looked at that. And now they've started what they call the Zoom group, and so modelers who model 2mm around the world come together every other Saturday and talk. And the difference there between an NMRA, I've been on a lot of NMRA meetings, the difference there was stark. One, most people were younger. Two, there was a lot more ladies there. And three, the stuff we were talking about was extremely technical. And we were talking about machining. They machine all their own wheel sets. We were just, this is just a general chit chat with a cup of coffee on a Saturday morning. This is not an organized thing. No one was giving a clinic or a presentation. But through that meeting, I saw how to take an original railway drawing and draw CAD over the top of it and turn that into brass etches. I learned that the other Saturday morning while I was having a coffee in my house. And then, and then I also, we looked at how to build etched nickel silver brass kits. And these kits are tiny, like smaller than an inch long, this rolling stock. And they recently did a series over 3 nights where they taught that. And that's the thing. That's why they're successful and they're growing, because what they've done is they recognize that what people seek is information and learning that they can't get somewhere else. The NMRA for a long time was that source. And then YouTube came along, and lots of great YouTube channels like your own, like, there's a lot of YouTube channels out there, that
Yeah.
yourself. They came along, and all of a sudden, all this information was out there free in the world, and you didn't need it anymore. But I can tell you now, there is not a single YouTube channel out there that sits with you, the modeler, and one-on-one, like we're talking now, helps you do a project, talks you through something, does a make and take. The NMRA does that in a face-to-face way today. Not everywhere, but we do it. And if we can find a way to make part of our focus of our education program be face-to-face education and training that you can only get if you're an NMRA member, to help you achieve your achievement program, to complete the achievement program, rather than it being styled as the correspondence course. I don't know if you understand that term, but that basically distant learning where you don't go to any training, you just tick the boxes, right? Which is pretty much what it is. Most people who do the achievement program, especially those in circumstances like myself where I'm isolated, I'm very in a remote and rural location, can't have that interaction and that mentorship that the achievement program was supposed to foster. And I think we've lost a little bit of our way there. And so if we as an organization can do more of that, can do more training, taking NMRAX style stuff to the next level as a member only benefit, we can't do it for free to everybody because we have to have a carrot. There has to be a carrot somewhere for the organization to survive and be sustainable. NMRAX in its current guise will never go away free. Okay, it's always going to be there free for people. That's why I started it, because I wanted people to feel connected and to show the depth of the organization and the depth of the hobby. And we've done over 200 hours of free to everyone live content from some of the best model railroaders in the world that you would probably never even heard of before April this year. So like everyone's kind of been dragged out the closet to come and talk to people live. And I think the next step for that is to provide face-to-face training and education where somebody can come along in the achievement program and succeed. Not watering it down, not changing any of it, but actually step-by-step walking through people, building at least one model. And that's what Modeling with the Masters does. But if you're not in the position financially to travel to the national conventions, you can't partake in Modeling with the Masters. But Modeling with the Masters is always oversubscribed. The Modeling with the Masters program is a face-to-face education program run by master model railroaders where they take 20 to 25 people into a room for 4-hour sessions. It started by Clark Kooning, MMR. Great. Clark's a fantastic guy. Now Jim Gore, MMR, is the manager of it. Peter Youngblood, MMR. Howard Goodwin, MMR. All fantastic modelers, good friends of mine who teach those sessions to people, and they're so popular. We need to get that level of education from our organization to our members mainstream. We need to help people through the achievement program. The achievement program is our 2 mil fine scale shop. It's the thing that no one else has. It's the thing that you can only get if you're a member. And it's one of the best member benefits that we have, in my opinion. But it's not the only member benefit that you have for joining the NMRA, of course. And so not everyone wants to do the achievement program. Some people who watch this video now will be going, I'm not interested in the achievement program. And that's fine. But there'll be an aspect of something in the achievement program that you struggle with. And whilst you don't want to do the whole program, if you struggle with electronics, you probably want to improve your knowledge in that or improve your skill set in that. And that's a gap that we have at the moment. But just one more member benefit. I'm going to mention one more member benefit of being a member of the NMRA. The NMRA is a partnership program, and I've gone around with Christina at various train shows and outside of train shows separately. And we, along with some members of the board, have recruited over 45 partners of the NMRA now. and ranging from anything from t-shirts to paintings of trains to various different small suppliers, cottage industries. It's not your big manufacturers. You get 15% off at Micromart though, so you can get there. Solvents, glues, paints, tools, models, kits, lots of craftsman kit structures, which of course are we promote with the achievement program, people building craftsman kits and trying new skills and taking their modeling to the next level so that they can be happier with it and feel that they're achieving their goals. You know, you can get a discount, and that NMRA membership fee is quite high. Even in the US, you know, it's quite high. It's quite a chunk of disposable income. You can't really turn around to someone and say, it's the price of a coffee a week, but I want you to pay for 52 coffees in one go, right? Is a bit of a difficult thing, you know. So, however, one order from Micromart and you can get your money back. If you're in North America, the partnership program is one of the biggest benefits of the NMRA, aside from the friendships and camaraderie and networking you'll get in your local division. So yeah, if you're not a member, I would encourage you to go check out the website, nmra.org, and go and see what's going on. And anything that you've heard that's a barrier to membership of the NMRA is total tosh. There are no barriers to being a member of the NMRA. If you can't afford to be a member of the NMRA, genuinely can't afford to be a member of the NMRA, come and talk to me and I'll personally pay for your NMRA membership, okay? Because it will be of that much benefit to you as an individual and a modeler and to your family. But honestly, you know, it's give it a shot, give it a go. You only get out what you get in. So, right, Drew, more questions.
Well, I kind of would like to start out by saying that I think that might just be the greatest conversational transition in the history of mankind. Wow. I really, I made it a point not to listen to the Lionel Strang interview so that I would, you know, not try to veer away from questions that he asked. And I don't know, I'm just very impressed by how passionate you are. I know I'm only 15, but I didn't expect that. I didn't expect that. And that's very cool, everything you're saying. Because how the NMRA has always been presented to me is I go up to somebody I know who's in it, and I'm like, oh, why should I join the NMRA? They're like, oh, train shows and support the hobby. I'm like, well, what does that mean? You just laid all that out. And I'll go join tonight. I swear to God I will. So it's the way that you present everything. I love it. I really do.
That's cool.
It's a completely different look. So I mean, what's some other stuff you want to change? Is if you run for, or if you are running for president, what's the stuff you want
If I'm successful, if we're successfully elected, that's the word we're looking for.
Yeah.
You know, that's cool. And listen, like when I was 15, when I was your age, like I tried to allude to at the beginning, my father was he's very conscious about damage.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my father's very much disciplinarian. And before we handled any of the railway books in our library, and I'm grateful for this now as I'm grown up, we would have to wash our hands twice, and we would have to dry our hands on a special towel. And we would have to prove to my dad would have to feel my hands to make sure there was no sweat, no stickiness, no marks, anything. And then he would allow me to look at one of his railway books. Okay. And still to this day, it's like that.
Wow.
And that's great because I'll inherit a fantastic collection of railway books, like a library that you'd kill for. But for all the modeling he was involved in, he never modeled himself when I was a kid, and he wouldn't let me model because I would make a mistake and damage it, and I couldn't learn how to do it. And if it wasn't for me going to those NMRA meetings, I would never have had the confidence or learn the basic skills to use a screwdriver to put things together, to line up my KDs and all that kind of stuff that would put me where I am today, where I'm very close to becoming a master model railroader. And a lot of that's had to be self-taught, but those little bits of confidence that I got when I was your age. 12, you're 15 now. When I was 16, I went away to sea in the military. That was a few months after the invasion of Iraq in 2003. And but when I was 15, when I was your age, once a month I was going to that group in that group in of NMRA members, and they weren't. I didn't know what weathering was. I didn't know what DCC was. The layout was still DC, and you had to sign in the log, and you got your 10 minutes to run your train round. And every week, like my goal was that the staging tracks were about 25 feet long, the shortest one about 20 feet, and I wanted my train to stretch to the end. And I used to keep going, trying to get my train to stretch to the end. And I just thought it was simply good if my train managed to go round the layout for 20 minutes without anything coming off the track. That was my only goal, was that the new thing that I'd built and come off the track. So things have progressed a lot. There wasn't YouTube then. There wasn't the access to the internet. We still had dial-up internet and stuff like that. I couldn't go and order anything. I remember going to a model shop, seeing things in the Wolfers catalogue, and then placing an order and having to wait until there was enough people that wanted to order something for Wolfers to ship it to the UK. And then getting a phone call, your stuff's arrived. Don't worry, Gordy. We'll keep it here for you till you can next come up. The model shop was 70 miles away. And so on a Saturday, I would go and get a train, and I would catch the train at 70 miles away from home. No cell phones then, remember, no cell phones, and go to the model shop, pay for my trains, buy some more stuff, and sit in the kitchen. There was like, it was a house, right, that was converted to a model shop. So in the kitchen at the back, there was some old 1970s seats, dining seats and stuff, and we'd sit there with cups of tea that were like soup, and listen to the boys talking. And I was never treated as an outsider, and no one should be. No one should be treated as an outsider. So I encourage you to get involved. Just don't be put off or knocked back by anybody who ignores you or may come across as a little bit mean or nasty to you, because it will happen. It will happen throughout your entire life, especially in model railroading. Sometimes it's because they're jealous. Sometimes it's because they've had a bad experience with somebody else in the past. You've got to sit back and understand where that person's coming from. But remember, for every one bad experience you have, there'll be 100 better ones. So just keep at it.
That's what I've been very fortunate to. At my club that I go to, all of the guys there, very nice. They took me under their wing. They helped me to do scenery and wiring, learn all that kind of stuff, and I'm very grateful for it. So
you probably know more than me.
What?
You probably know more than me. You can probably put me to shame.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I wouldn't say.
I bet you do.
Cool.
I bet you do.
Well, we made it through an hour and 10 minutes of interview without saying the words Jason Schron a single time. So